This morning they have never been in England, and this morning we took a tour for a few hours.
Rita Hayworth lit up the screen in Gilda and was the pin-up girl soldiers loved during World War II. But behind her smile was a terrible secret. As a young girl, she was forced into a life she didn't choose and hurt by someone she trusted the most. Years later, she spoke about the pain that followed her everywhere. This is the heartbreaking story of what Rita Hayworth went through behind the scenes. Rita Hayworth was born on October 17, 1918, in Brooklyn, New York. She came into the world during a difficult time when World War I was ending, and the Spanish flu was spreading everywhere. But her family had something special. They lived and breathed dance. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, came all the way from Spain in 1913. He came from a famous family of dancers who taught even the Spanish royal family. Her mother, Volga, was from Irish and English roots and had danced in big shows called the Ziegfeld Follies. Margarita grew up in a small apartment in Brooklyn with her two younger brothers, Eduardo Jr. and Vernon. Her father had big dreams for her. From a very young age, he began teaching her to dance, just like his father had taught him. By the time she was 3 years old, Margarita was already learning her first dance moves. Her first lessons were with her grandfather when he visited them from Spain. Not long after, she performed for an audience at a charity event. Imagine a tiny girl in a flamenco dress, dancing with her father. It was her first taste of the stage, and people loved her. But learning to dance wasn't always fun. By age 5, Margarita was training every day with her Uncle Angel. She practiced for hours, working on tough footwork and arm movements until she was exhausted. Even though she was so young, she worked hard and kept improving. When Margarita was 8, her family made a big decision. They moved to Hollywood. Her father thought dancing could be a big part of movies, so they left Brooklyn and traveled across the country to California. They settled in a small town near San Diego called Chula Vista. Eduardo opened a dance studio and started teaching famous Hollywood stars like James Cagney and Jean Harlow. He believed Hollywood was their chance to succeed. But things didn't go as planned. The movie industry was changing, and there wasn't much work for dancers. On top of that, the Great Depression was starting, and it was hard for the family to make money. Meanwhile, something dark was happening with Rita behind the scenes. When Rita Hayworth was just 12 years old, her father pulled Rita out of school. She never went back. From that moment on, her childhood was over. Eduardo didn't see her as his daughter anymore. He saw her as a way to revive his failing dance career. Rita had been learning to dance since she was 3, but now it became her whole life. Rita didn't want to be a dancer. She was quiet and shy, and dancing didn't make her happy. But she didn't have the courage to say no to her father. Years later, she said, "I didn't like dancing very much, but I didn't have the courage to tell my father. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. That was my girlhood." While other kids were making friends and living normal lives, Rita spent every day practicing. Her world was small, just her father and dancing. She missed out on everything a young girl should have experienced. In 1931, Eduardo created a new dance act called the Dancing Cansinos, and Rita became his partner. He wanted them to stand out, so he changed her. He dyed her brown hair black to make her look older and gave her costumes that were too grown up for a child. She wore heavy makeup and bright red lipstick, even though she was only a little girl. The training was intense. Rita danced for hours every day, with Eduardo pushing her to be perfect. She was exhausted, but she kept going because she didn't want to disappoint him. The worst part was Eduardo's lie. He told everyone that Rita wasn't his daughter. He said she was his wife. This was a trick to make their act seem more mature. It was confusing and unfair for Rita, but she had no choice but to go along with it. By 1932, when Rita was just 13, Eduardo moved their act to Tijuana, Mexico. California's laws didn't allow children to perform in nightclubs, but Tijuana didn't have the same rules. On Christmas Day that year, the dancing Cansinos performed for the first time at a nightclub called the Foreign Club. From then on, Rita was dancing up to 5 shows a day. The places she performed in were far from safe for a young girl. They were casinos, nightclubs, and even gambling ships. The people in the audience were adults, and the environment was filled with alcohol and gambling. It was no place for a 13-year-old. One of the biggest places they performed was Agua Caliente, a glamorous entertainment center in Tijuana. Hollywood stars and wealthy Americans came there to escape the restrictions of prohibition. It was shiny and exciting on the outside, but for Rita, it was a nightmare. She had to perform dances meant for adults, pretending to be someone much older than she really was. After the shows, she mingled with the crowd, and most people assumed she was an adult. She was just a kid, stuck in a world that didn't care about her age or how she felt. Rita's early life was marked by another terrible secret: the sexual abuse she endured at the hands of her own father, Eduardo Cansino. This horrifying mistreatment began when Rita was just a young girl of 12, around the same time she left school to perform with her family in the Dancing Cansinos Act. According to a biography by Barbara Leeming, this abuse happened regularly during their performances on the road. Eduardo would often share a hotel room with Rita, claiming he needed to protect her or save money. That's when the unthinkable would occur. Even more heartbreaking, Rita's mother, Volga, knew about the abuse to some degree. In a desperate attempt to shield her daughter, Volga would sometimes sleep in the same bed as Rita when they traveled. But sadly, her efforts weren't enough to stop the abuse completely. The abuse had a deep and lasting impact on Rita. It led her to seek out older, controlling men in her relationships, as she had learned from a young age to associate love with abuse and control. Rita later told her second husband, Orson Welles, about the terrible things her father had done to her. This trauma likely played a role in Rita's struggles with alcohol later in her life, as well as her trouble forming healthy relationships. As one biographer put it, Rita had been used and abused sexually from the time she was a child. Her father and first husband, Judson, had trained her well in how to arouse and please men, but no one had ever taught her how to be pleased herself. But when she stepped up into Hollywood, she didn't stop. To look the way Hollywood wanted, Rita went through a painful procedure called electrolysis to change her hairline. This process took a whole year and was extremely painful. It involved removing hair with a metal probe to make her forehead look higher and more Western. With this new look, she started catching the attention of filmmakers, and her career began to take off. In 1939, Rita signed with Columbia Pictures, and her life changed. She landed her first big role in Only Angels Have Wings, acting alongside Cary Grant. At the time, Rita wasn't well known, but this movie gave her a chance to show how talented and charming she really was. She played Judy McPherson, the wife of a disgraced aviator, and her first big moment in the film became unforgettable. As she walked down a staircase, the audience couldn't take their eyes off her. This scene turned her into someone everyone wanted to watch. As her career took off, something unexpected made her even more famous. In 1941, Life magazine published a photo of Rita kneeling on a bed, wearing a silk and lace nightgown. It was simple, but the picture became one of the most famous pin-up photos ever. By the end of World War II, over 5 million copies of that photo had been shared. Soldiers loved it so much that the U.S. Navy even nicknamed her the redhead we would most like to be shipwrecked with. However, not everything about her fame was good. In 1946, without asking her, the U.S. government used her image on an atomic bomb for a test in the Pacific. Rita was horrified when she found out. Her husband, Orson Welles, said it was the angriest he had ever seen her. She wanted to speak out against it, but Harry Cohn stopped her, saying it would look unpatriotic. It was a moment that deeply upset her, even as her career kept growing. Rita's most famous role came the same year in the movie Gilda. She played the title character, a woman caught in a complicated love triangle. The movie made her a legend, especially one unforgettable scene where she sang, "Put the blame on Mame," while slowly removing a black glove. It wasn't much of a striptease, but it was done with such confidence and sensuality that it became iconic. Gilda was a massive success, earning millions at the box office. Years later, it was added to the National Film Registry because of its importance in film history. But while Rita was loved on screen, she struggled with how Hollywood turned her into a sex symbol. She was born Margarita Carmen Cancino and looked very different when she started. Hollywood made her change everything: her name, her hair color, and even her hairline through painful procedures. This made her more American in the eyes of the public, but it wasn't who she really was. In real life, Rita was quiet and shy, nothing like the confident and glamorous roles she played. She once said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me," showing how far apart her real self was from her screen image. Rita's personal life was as dramatic as any Hollywood movie. She married 5 times, and every marriage came with problems. Her second husband, Orson Welles, was a brilliant filmmaker, and their relationship made headlines. People called them Beauty and the Brain, but their marriage was far from perfect. Orson fell in love with her beauty and chased her until she said yes. They married in 1943, but Orson was always more focused on his work than on Rita. He often ignored her, and within 2 years was already seeing other women. They had a daughter, Rebecca, in 1944, but even that didn't bring them closer. Rita later said that Orson didn't want to settle down or even buy a home. He told her he never should have married because it interfered with his freedom. They separated in 1946, though they briefly reunited to work on The Lady from Shanghai. That didn't help, and by 1947, they divorced. Despite all the hurt, Rita later called Orson the great love of her life, showing how complicated their relationship really was. Not long after Orson, Rita's life took another dramatic turn when she met Prince Ali Khan, a wealthy and charming playboy. He was known for his lavish lifestyle and love for fast cars, gambling, and women. In 1948, Rita traveled to France, where she met him. Ali fell for her instantly and didn't hold back. He even hired a fortune teller to convince her they were meant to be together. The media loved their romance, calling them the love goddess and the playboy prince. They married in 1949 in a glamorous ceremony, and Rita left Hollywood to live with him in France. At first, it seemed like a fairy tale, but things quickly fell apart. Rita found it hard to adjust to Ali's fast-paced lifestyle and struggled to learn French. Ali's reputation as a womanizer also caused problems. They had a daughter, Yasmin, in 1949, but their marriage didn't last. By 1951, Rita had returned to New York with her daughters. The divorce was messy, with Ali offering her money if she agreed to raise Yasmin as a Muslim and let her visit Europe every year. Rita refused, choosing to raise her daughter as a Christian. The whole ordeal hurt her career and reputation, but she was determined to move on. Her fourth husband, singer Dick Haymes, made things worse. Their relationship was toxic, filled with public arguments and violence. In one shocking incident, Dick slapped Rita in a crowded club, leaving her with a black eye. The marriage ended after 2 years, but the damage to Rita's emotional health was already done. Her fifth husband, James Hill, also treated her poorly. He was emotionally abusive and often humiliated her in front of others. Actor Charlton Heston once saw Hill yell at Rita so much that she broke down in tears at the dinner table. Rita Hayworth's career started to fall apart in the 1960s when she began having serious trouble remembering her lines. It became obvious during the filming of The Money Trap in 1965. She struggled so much that simple scenes became a nightmare. On one occasion, it took her 27 tries to say a single line correctly. This was a shocking change for someone who was once admired for her quick thinking and effortless charm on screen. Things got worse in 1971 when she tried to return to the spotlight. She was cast in a Broadway play, Step on a Crack, but rehearsals turned into a disaster. One day, she spent hours trying to memorize just a short speech. The director eventually canceled the play to save her from embarrassment, giving the public a vague excuse about health reasons. Behind closed doors, everyone knew her memory issues had become unmanageable. For many years, people misunderstood what was happening to Rita. Everyone assumed her behavior was caused by alcohol, which led to unfair judgment and no proper help. In 1976, this misunderstanding caused a public scandal at Heathrow Airport. Witnesses saw her acting confused and thought she was drunk. The media pounced, and the incident became front-page news, further ruining her reputation. As her health declined, her once glittering career faded. In the 1960s, she went from being one of Hollywood's biggest stars to barely working. Between 1964 and 1972, she appeared in only a handful of films. Her last major role was in Circus World, 1964, starring alongside John Wayne. While she earned a Golden Globe nomination for her performance, it was clear to those on set that Rita was struggling. The director had to use cue cards to help her remember her lines. Rita's final film was The Wrath of God in 1972. By then, her memory had deteriorated so much that she could only manage to say one line at a time. The filmmakers had to piece her scenes together in small segments, and even use body doubles for certain shots. Everyone knew this would be her last movie. Rita Hayworth's battle with Alzheimer's began long before anyone knew what was wrong. For nearly 10 years, she struggled with symptoms, but it wasn't until 1980 that she got an official diagnosis. This happened at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York, where Dr. Ronald Feeve confirmed she had Alzheimer's. At first, Rita didn't even want to get the CT scan needed to diagnose her. Maybe she was scared, or maybe she just didn't want to face what was happening. But when the diagnosis came, it didn't just change her life. It made people finally pay attention to Alzheimer's, a disease that had been forgotten for decades. In 1981, the world learned about Rita's illness. On June 1st, a court in Los Angeles declared that she could no longer take care of herself. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, became her legal guardian. This announcement was a big deal because it was the first time a major celebrity had been linked to Alzheimer's. Before this, most people didn't even know what Alzheimer's was. Suddenly, Rita's story made the disease real to the public. Hollywood was shocked by the news. For years, people had gossiped about Rita's odd behavior, blaming it on alcohol. But now, they realized it wasn't her fault. This glamorous movie star, once called the love goddess, was battling something far more serious. It forced people in the entertainment industry to rethink how they saw aging and mental health. After the court ruling, Yasmin, who was only 31, stepped in to care for her mother. She moved Rita from Beverly Hills to New York City and lived next door so she could always be close. Taking care of her mother wasn't easy. Rita's behavior became unpredictable, sometimes aggressive, sometimes difficult to handle. But Yasmin stayed patient and loving. She said it felt natural to care for her mom because they had always been close. Hayworth's tragic death on May 14, 1987, at the age of 68, marked the end of an era in Hollywood, but also sparked a crucial conversation about Alzheimer's disease. After her passing, her story made a big difference. It pushed more funding into Alzheimer's research and helped educate the public about the illness. In the 5 years after her diagnosis was revealed, research funding went up by 50%. This extra money helped researchers learn more about the disease and how to treat it better in the future. But Hayworth's legacy didn't stop there. In 1984, her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, started the Rita Hayworth Gala to honor her mother and raise money for Alzheimer's research. What started as a small event grew into something incredible. By 2024, the gala had raised over $87 million to fight the disease. The very first gala raised $200,000, a decent amount at the time, but things got much bigger. In 2023, the Chicago Gala alone raised almost $900,000 in one night. These events became huge gatherings, bringing together celebrities, doctors, and donors. In 2024, the Chicago Gala had special guests like Princess Yasmin herself and even John Bryant, a coach from the Chicago Bulls. One of the most touching parts of the gala is the Philanthropy Award, given to people who work hard to fight Alzheimer's. In 2024, the award went to Susan and Jim Draddy. They had spent 15 years supporting the gala, and back in 2015, they helped raise $1.3 million as event chairs.